And here we go. Welcome to it's actually episode 61, a special edition of Stick to Hockey Live. You see him right there. It is one and only Bill Meltzer. Bill, how are you?
I am definitely doing well. How about you?
We got one to go. 81 down, one to go.
Yeah. Yes. Home schedule is done. Oddly enough, been finished hockey 500 at home, which tells you what the road record's been like. So.
Yeah. So they'll wrap it up tomorrow in Chicago. But this is an episode, Bill, you and I look forward to all season, every season. I think this is the third or fourth year that we have welcomed you and I. We joint tandem have a great, honest, and deep dive conversation with TSN's Craig Button, and he is going to join us momentarily. Your thoughts?
For anything, anything related around the league, but especially scouting and drafting stuff. I love just kind of picking Craig's brain and hearing his perspective. And as you know, Craig's a guy with some strong opinions, and there's always rationale behind them too. So yeah, definitely something I look forward to. I feel like I learn something every time we talk to him. So
yeah, and Craig, every time he comes on, tends to make news. There's always stories written about his appearances on Stick to Hockey Live. So I can't wait and I'm so grateful that he doesn't do a lot of podcasts. So I'm grateful that he joins us every season, and it's become kind of a tradition, and I love his energy, and he's just a good hockey man. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. But Bill, let's talk about Owen Tippett before Craig gets on, because man, did you see last night? He went Marshawn Lynch beast mode on the first goal, and then the second goal in overtime again. But the first one, he finished in tight with a great snipe.
Exactly what we've been talking about. Taking the puck to the net, and the way he pulled it backhand to forehand. Actually went backhand forehand in both goals last night.
Yeah.
But yeah, just seeing the combination of his elusiveness and his sheer power too. It was a power forward with speed. And then to have the finish too. That was sweet. That looked like a guy who's hopefully in the very near future, at least a 30 goal, if not more, guy. That was great.
Yeah, I see 35 to 40 potential there. If he's on a team that's got a really good power play, then I see 35 to 40, because he'll eat there too.
Yeah, it was also nice for to get a power play goal from him.
Yeah,
last night. So that's there's just so much. There is young talent there. When people say the lack of top end talent, I'd say, listen, there's not a McDavid type or anything like that, but there are young guys there who can be pretty darn solid NHL players, even if they're just surrounding pieces to your franchise player who's not there yet. But these are quality players and talented players. A lot of these guys were first round picks. Farabee has been coming on. Frost continues to be the middle of chances. The last few games, nothing's been going in for him, but he continues to play really well too. So those guys have been the big bright spot this season.
Well, let's look. First of all, Tippett, it's the burst. The first step. You can see his confidence is off the charts. You can see it with Frost too. He goes in on Juracek last night on the Farabee goal, and it's a 1v2 board battle below the goal line. But what Frost does is he fakes like he's going to one side of Juracek, kind of ties up his hands for a second, and then wins that 1v2 puck battle and gets it to Konechny, who then gets it to Farabee for the goal. That's where Frost has improved so much. When he came in, Bill, he was a nightmare on the boards.
Absolutely. And he's never going to be the biggest, strongest guy. There's room for him this offseason once again to add a little further strength, and I think that's one of the challenges for him. But one of the biggest things that And he said it on Flyers Daily earlier this season. One of the things that Rocky has emphasized, you're not going to out muscle guys, but use your legs, get in there, get the puck, and get out because you have quick hands too.
Yeah,
and
good stick.
Yeah, quick stick too. So that was a perfect example of what they talked to him about this season, and that was really there's obviously there's no goal there if you don't win that battle behind the net. So
nope, and to do it in a 1v2, sometimes the secondary assist is like a Bobo assist. But in this case, the secondary assist is even more important than the primary assist because no primary assist happens if that play doesn't happen.
Yeah, and so in a related note, shout out to Claude Giroux for his 1,000th point. That tremendous accomplishment. The year that Giroux had his career year with the Flyers, the 102-point season. I mean, one of the arguments against him winning the Hart Trophy that year. Mike Johnson was one who made too many secondary assists. And I said, if you're really watching him, if you go back and rewatch those games, those secondary assists, a lot of those were really primaries. Yeah. He would slide across to Voracek or somebody, and then like Simmons or somebody tap in the rebound. But it was really the real chance was created on the secondary. He
was the catalyst.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So. I mean, he's got 100, or he's got 1,001 now in 1,099 games, and he's also tied a career high in goals with 34 this year. He only had 34 that 1 year when he had the 102. And the thing about this is, if you look at his numbers, Bill, before the 102, he had the 58-point season, and everybody was saying he was turning 30. He's a player on the decline. His points have declined from 70-something to 60-something to 58. Then he comes in with the 102. And once again, since that 102, he's been unbelievable. When you look at his numbers, just sheer numbers, Hall of Fame? Is he a Hall of Famer?
He's right there. I mean,
there's a good argument to be made.
There were guys who never won a cup or whatever who were in the Hall of Fame. He's really getting into that discussion.
Yeah. And he's got look. He doesn't look like he's slowing down.
No, he looks like there's definitely still some gas in the tank too. So you keep building that case.
Yeah, I sent him a text yesterday. I said, "Not bad for a 22nd overall pick." Good, congrats on the 1,000, old man. And he texted back. I mean, I really appreciate it. So congrats to Claude Giroux. I'm happy for his success there and back home and everything. So it's amazing to me what he's been able to do. Bill, one of the things obviously is Tony DeAngelo. Scratched 4 straight games. There's a lot of mystery. This is shrouded in mystery. I always wanted to use that term, shrouded in mystery. Tony DeAngelo. Has he played his last game as a Flyer?
We were discussing this yesterday in the press box. I said, here's the thing with Torts, right? He could have knockdown dragouts with DeAngelo, and he could be proving a point to him right now by not playing again this season and still want him back.
Yeah. Yep.
If you understand Torts, that I don't think it necessarily means he's gone. I do think it means that a line was crossed, that you're gonna obviously have to bend some fences there, but I don't think it necessarily means he's gone. I don't think he's going to be a long-term Flyer. It's a 2-year deal. I think the Flyers will be open to moving him this summer, but I don't think it's absolutely a lock that he's not back by any means.
Mm-hmm. That is true about Torts. Like it can go hard and the punishment can be strict, but it doesn't mean I have to cast you away.
Yeah.
He's one of the few coaches that will do that. So tomorrow night they play Chicago. Who was it the last Flyer game for? Is it the last time we see Kevin Hayes in a Flyers jersey? Is it the last time we see Ivan Provorov in a Flyer jersey? I talked to Provy last night after the game and taped him in an interview. I thought he was excellent in the game last night. But those guys it may be the last spin for them. But let's get to our guest of honor, because he joins us every season. We love having him. He does fantastic work, not good work, fantastic work on TSN. It is the one and only Mr. Craig J. Button. And there he is. Craig, how are you?
I'm really, really good. How are you guys? I'm just trying to get my AirPods adjusted, but I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Fine, Craig. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, we'll just continue to work through this.
Yes. How are things? How have you been? How have you enjoyed the season?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that the season is coming to a conclusion. We start out every September, October, watching, and you make your predictions, and then the season unfolds, and some of the predictions are accurate, and some of them are not, and some are way off, and but it's kind of I think what's really become apparent to me anyway is that I finally feel, and I do feel this, I feel that the NHL has moved closer to the NFL with respect to, you can see changes in teams' fortunes. I'm not going to say quickly, because it would not be the right way to say quickly when you're talking about the New Jersey Devils or the Buffalo Sabres. But the Seattle Kraken are in the playoffs in their second year in the league, and that was never an easy place to follow. And the Florida Panthers, President's Trophy winners, just qualified for the playoffs on Tuesday night. The Flames are out. It looks like the Penguins are going to be out. So the Washington Capitals are out. So you now have this opportunity, I think, for a broader fan base to believe that their teams don't have to be mired in mediocrity for long stretches of time. And I think that's a good thing. And the NHL is never going to be like the NFL because of older players, free agency, college players ready to step in. But I do think that the NHL now, next year we could see again, 4 or 5 new teams in the playoffs, and 4 or 5 that were in this year out. I think that's good for a league. I think it's good for fan base.
Craig, to me, the biggest intrigue every year, and this year is going to be no exception, are those 2-3 matchups, because those are really damn good teams in those 2-3 spots.
Oh, there's no question about. I mean, okay, so let's look at the Devils. I mean, the Devils could still finish in first, but whether the Rangers play the Devils or the Hurricanes, I mean, those are 100-point teams, right? You have the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs. You start to think about, Edmonton. Are they going to finish in first, or is Vegas going to finish in first? And so you end up with these, and same in the Central Division. Like, who's it going to be? Is it going to be? It's going to be 2 of either Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota. Really good teams. And to your point, Bill, those are teams that, certainly at the end of the playoff round, one's going to be really happy, and there's going to be massive disappointment with 4 teams that lose in that first round. And they're good teams, and they've had successful seasons, but you get measured on the playoffs.
That's the thing, Craig. I remember last season, you looked at the Eastern Conference, you knew the 8 teams going into the playoffs, maybe by Christmas. And the playoffs were set in the East, and it was just a matter of jockeying for position. This year, like you said, Pittsburgh, I don't know how they boot that game against Chicago last night at home. I'm going, you got to be kidding me. They had the easiest of all the schedule of the 3 teams, and they end up losing that game. It's going to cost them. I mean, no Crosby in the playoffs, no Ovechkin. That hasn't happened since, 2003? And, I mean, this is a changing of the guard. And the days, the Cup's always hard to win. But right now it looks damn near impossible to win for any team the way these matchups go, because there's just so many teams. You go, oh, my God, there's so much talent here.
And there is, and to your point, Jason, I mean, we're watching the game last night with Chicago and Pittsburgh, and it just seemed like a matter of time before Pittsburgh was going to find their way into the game, and they did, and they tied up 1-1, and then it just slipped out of their hands. And listen to Crosby after the game. I mean, there will never be an acceptance from those guys about like where there is, because they always have that hope, but it was almost like there was a resignation. That it's coming to an end, and you can see it coming to an end. I mean, the Islanders, all they need is 1 point against Montreal on Wednesday night, and the Penguins are officially out. But it is a changing of the guard, and and so when you set your plan and you set your goals at the beginning of the season, you have a good team, and again, so
Toronto, Tampa Bay, one of those teams. And if it's Toronto again, who knows what's going to happen up in Toronto. Tampa Bay, I mean, there's a little bit more leniency because of their success. But, you know, that 2-3 matchup in the Metropolitan, the 2-3 matchup in the Central and in the Pacific, there's going to be massive disappointment. It won't matter that you had 100 points and, oh, yeah, we had a good season. Our young players really grew. It's going to be a disappointing end to 4-team season, save for Tampa Bay if they move out. But if it's not Tampa Bay, massive disappointment for 4 teams.
Yeah.
And Craig, when you look at rosters league-wide, especially the crop that's coming in the draft this year, I've never seen so many ridiculously skilled hockey players. And a lot of them are smaller guys. That's not even a limiting factor anymore.
Yeah, you know, the small players you guys know have always found a way to the National Hockey League. They always have, and they always will. You know, in 2005, and you know, this year's draft, for the most part, are 2005 born players. So, you know, you go back and, you know, we knew the game when it was played in a very different way with obstruction and the big hulking player impeding the skilled player. And, you know, and it didn't matter if the skilled player was big or small. I mean, Maryland Lemieux, you know, was in a rodeo just about every game. But now these kids, they only know the game one way. I was talking to some parents last night. They have 2 boys, 10 and 8. And the father was telling me, he said, yeah, there doesn't just seem to be much physicality in the game. And I said, okay, so we remember as no physicality. So I turned to the 2 boys. And, you know, they're young boys. They're 10 and 8 years old. And I said, what do you like about the game? And they said, oh, the skating, oh, the stick handling. I said, what do you work on? Oh, the Michigan. We want to score the Michigan, right? Like, you know. And so I said, what about body checking? They go, no, we don't. They don't play with body checking at that age, but they don't see it. So it's not something they're practicing. It's not something they're doing. So will there be, I call it friction. I think what we have now in the game is physical, is friction. It's body on body trying to gain position. But the way the game was played with body checking and real hard, you know, I'm going to deliver a body check to you. I mean, that's a part of the game that I don't think is coming back. And I think it's quickly, you know, not quickly, it's taken some time, but I think it's not going to be part of the game in the way that we remember it being part of the game. And the kids don't even know that it was part of the game now.
Yeah, because they watch YouTube videos, Craig.
Yeah.
And they want to work on all they get in their garage, they watch these YouTube videos, and they sit there and they stick handle until they can pull these magical little dangles and everything. And you're seeing it across the league. And I mean, I got Michigan in a beer league game. We were winning 8-0, and normally we were up 8-0, and the guy would have done that to me. I would have given him the goalie stick to the side of the head. But I was like, holy shit, he did it so good. I had to give him stick taps and respect it. But anyway, this year with this draft, Craig, with, you know, a guy like Bedard at the top and Fantilli and all these great players in this draft that's been pointed at for a while, has caused a lot of, you know, a very one of those things happening that a lot of people are afraid to talk about, and it's the tanking element of it and positioning yourself to have the best chance to land a player that frankly lands your team on the front page of the newspaper, old school term, for many years to come, like it did Sidney Crosby in Pittsburgh. The moment he was drafted, the Pittsburgh Penguins were front page news on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and it's still that way all these years later. That's what a Bedard can do. Let me get your thoughts on, you know, teams positioning themselves and pseudo tanking to try and get those 18.5% odds to land Bedard. What's your thoughts on how that's played out this year?
Well, you know, actually it's 25.5 because you can only move up 10 spots, right?
Yeah.
So it's even. So you got a 1 in 4 chance to get a generational player. You know, yeah, people go, oh yeah, it's not worth it. Yeah, it is worth it. So if I have a chance to get a generational player, to your point, Jason, you know, think about where Pittsburgh and Washington were at when Crosby was drafted. Pittsburgh was coming off of drafting Ovechkin. There was a lockout, and then Crosby comes in the league. Those two franchises, those two cities were not hockey cities. When I say hockey cities, they were not cities where their hockey team was supported. They'd been mired in all kinds of mediocrity, and mediocrity might be kind because they were so bad, and they were having all kinds of problems financially. And then these two players, and certainly Crosby comes along, I mean, they changed the fortunes of the front to the point now where 18 years later, those players are still great. And you're right. They've been front and center. They've been front and center in not only the faces of the league, but on the front pages of media, television, national broadcasts. Obviously the Stanley Cup playoffs, you can market those guys. So I just talk about those guys as I head into Bedard. Listen, players don't tank.
Never.
Management sets up the tanking by not having good players. The players are always going to give their best, right? That's just the fact of the matter. Players aren't going to go out there and say, "Oh, I'm purposely losing it." It's not in them. But the team, the management sets up their team to, be in a spot where you have a real difficult time winning, with the idea that when a player like Bedard comes and we give ourselves the best opportunity to win the lottery, it is worth it in every single regard. Because I think the worst place to be is in what they call the mushy middle. I call it 7-Eleven. You never want to be in that 7-Eleven spot because you're not moving up and you're not moving down. If you're not moving down, it's harder to improve. And if you're 7, it's hard to improve because you don't get a high enough pick and you're not really challenging anybody. The Minnesota Wild were there forever. They're in the playoffs every year, but they were never going anywhere. So you get a chance to get a special player, and Bedard is all of that and more. Like there's no way that you look at your team, and I give Kyle Davidson total credit. Because Kyle Davidson said last summer, no, we're out. This is what I'm doing. We're cleaning it out. We're starting anew with the idea that they had an opportunity to, have the best odds to get Bedard. Whether that happens or not, I mean, they hurt their chances last night by beating the Penguins, and you have to look at the big picture. And the salary cap in the CBA, works to say you got to spend a minimum of this amount on your cap, and there's nuances to it. But there's no way that a team can say that given where we sit, given our situation, that they're not tanking. We don't like the word tank and everything, but how can anybody say that Kyle Davidson wasn't setting his team up to not be the worst team? There's no way you can say it. And
you get rid of Doc, you get rid of DeBrincat. You know it's coming.
Yeah, you do, and rightfully so. Like, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, you want to tank, put a sieve in that. That's the best way to do it. Go ahead, Bill.
On the flip side, though, Craig, is there I'll refer to the Philadelphia situation because they are trying to reestablish an identity to be a more competitive hockey team. This Tortorella, do use the term, set a standard, be harder to play against. And certainly that's where a coach is going to approach it from. If your organizational direction is we're really not, maybe we're not competing right now, but we're working towards something. It does essentially losing a season because every team has some young guys they're trying to develop, bring along, and be contributing players in the long term. Is there a little bit of a trade-off with that when you are so focused on what's ahead, what's your next draft position, what do the next couple drafts look like?
Oh yeah, no, there's no question about that. And then let's take the Flyers situation. So, you bring in a new coach, right? So a new coach comes in, and John has come in, and he said that this is the standard that we want to play at. We want to be harder to play against. So now you have a new coach that is establishing this is how I'm running things, and with that comes different expectations. It comes with different growing pains. The Flyers have seen that even with some of their young players this year, and then you start to evaluate. Okay, where are we really at in this picture? Where do we stand in terms of, how do we make ourselves better? How do we make ourselves harder to play against? All the things that go with coach and management speak. But you also have a timeline. What amazes me, and this is how, I think it's a great question in my mind. I ask myself this. Back in the lockout year, 2019, or not lockout year, the pandemic year, when the season got 2019-20, I'm watching that Flyers team that year, and I'm thinking, this is a really, really good team. I thought they were a really, really good team. I was massively impressed. Season gets shut down in March. But hey, listen, I was on the Flyers bandwagon there. And then they came back and played. And even though they beat the Montreal Canadiens, I started to go, ooh, geez, and they weren't the team that I thought they were. Now I understood that there might have been a 6-month span between playing games, 5 months, whatever it was, but it seemed that they stayed mired in that place of lack, and it seemed to happen quick. And I don't know why it happened quick. And like I said, that's part of the evaluation. So it leads to a new coach coming in. It leads to okay, what does the future look like? You got young players, but are they ready to play? You got some players that are not. And it's pretty straightforward, where the coach says, you know what, they don't really fit to what I want to establish. So you kind of have this kind of fits and starts, right? You kind of go one way, and then you're trying to go another way, then you're trying to. And how patient, and when I say patient, can people be with it? I'm talking about players, management, coaches, owners, and I think that's where the Flyers find themselves with that. To your point, Bill, is that they're caught in this place where they kind of, this is where we want to go, but we're not really sure if we're committed to going there. And you got to put a stake in the ground. And I'm not saying I would never suggest, hey, we're just blowing it up. I'm not saying that that's the answer, but saying that, like, here's what we're going to do, and how, and hey, the Flyers, I call the Flyers an original 7 franchise. I think after the original 6, I think the Flyers come right there, established brand, established in the league as a go-to franchise. And right now they're struggling. They're struggling in a similar manner to the late 80s, early 90s.
Yep.
When Mr. Snyder, essentially left the organization and his son Jay ran it. And but they came out of it with Eric Lindros, and then the next years were really quite phenomenal. And Stanley Cup final in 2010 and some really good players. But it just seems now that they know where they want to go. It's just like, okay, what's the timeline, and what's the commitment level to saying, okay, we know where we want to go. We want to be hard to play against, but it's going to be hard to get there if we don't commit to it fully. It's no different than playing on the ice. You got to commit to it.
And the thing is, and they need high-end talent, and that's where it comes in. Craig, as a guy that has been involved in hockey management and front offices, as your general manager, Chuck Fletcher gets let go. Danny Briere is the interim general manager, and the sense is that interim tag will be removed. They are separating the jobs, and they are searching for a president of hockey operations. And they've put the word rebuild on the table, believe it or not, from a Flyer standpoint. So first, your thoughts on Danny Briere, and if Danny Briere is the GM, who's a good candidate to be the president of hockey operations? What skill sets does that person need to help a first-time general manager navigate this rebuild?
Well, and I think that you've touched right on it, Jason. Like, I think the big question is, okay, if you're going to have Danny Briere be the general manager, and I'll talk about him in a second. Okay, like you might need a different president of hockey operations. You might need a real seasoned hockey executive, somebody that can, that Danny can lean on, and that can, guide Danny and work with Danny.
Type.
Bingo. Like, and when Jeff was named, the president, vice, whatever, he essentially, let's call him the president of hockey operations, despite the title, right? Jeff had massive amounts of hockey experience, and you're Kent Hughes. You can bounce in there and talk to him about things. And Jeff has got lots of experience. He's worked in Boston. He's worked in New York. So he's worked in big markets. So he really understands. As it relates to the president, so I'll stay on the president here and assume that Danny's going to be the GM and the interim tag is going to be taken off, and then I'll talk about Danny. But you better have somebody that understands the Philadelphia market, the Flyers market, and the sporting market. Like, I think those are the two things that are intertwined. That's a great sporting market. It's a fan base that's passionate about their teams. They love their teams, and we know what the Flyers have meant over the years. So somebody that understands the marketplace in every area, there has to be somebody that's experienced in hockey. that has a real understanding of how they can help Danny. Having somebody that's probably gone through it, and can, hey, Danny, I know when I went to Calgary, Al McNeil, I'd sit down with Al McNeil, who'd been around forever, and we talk about something and an idea. And Al had this great manner about him. He would talk about, like, yeah, I remember back in 1982, we were talking about this, and he would go through the story, and by the end of it, you go, yeah, we're not doing that. Like, because
real life.
Everybody has great ideas, right? But if you don't have a kind of a knowledge, institutional knowledge of how things have played out in the past, like, it's not that your idea is bad. It's just that it's been tried and it hasn't been successful. So I think that's a really important element for whoever they look at in president of hockey operations. I really think it's important in that regard. As it relates to Danny, I mean, I think when Danny's gone and worked at different levels. And, I see Danny in the rinks. I saw Danny not last weekend, but the weekend before in Chicago. He was there scouting the national team development program. And I've seen Danny, working in the minors. And he's a very well-respected person because of his manner. He takes time to talk to the players and spend time with the people. Like, he's not somebody that's going to just decide that I'm gonna just be a manager. He wants to do the work. He wants to understand the work that goes in to being a good team. And I think when you're a manager, the more you can understand what the scouts are doing, what the minor league operation is doing, what the minor league coaches are going through, and now you know how it's all connected. I think that only helps you be a better manager. And I think Danny has done all those things. And I think that, he's got a keen eye for the game. I think he's got a real sharp eye for the game. And I think more importantly, you think about Danny as a player, and I've chatted with Danny here and there over the years. Danny knows what he likes. And there's not one right way to do things. There's a lot of different ways to be right. And there's a lot of different players that can help you be successful. But I think as a manager, you have to believe in your vision. And I think that Danny has a really strong idea of what can work, what he wants to see work. And I quite frankly, I think he's ready. I think he's ready to be a manager. And I think he's ready, not just in terms of what he's done, but also understanding, what's going to be required to be successful.
Well, Danny, it's so important you said that, because I think there's a perception as well, if you're going to bring in a president of hockey ops, you very well may have three people with very strong opinions. Especially as someone who's been a general manager in the past, which I think is helpful, having somebody with experience. But you can end up you want to keep moving forward. Tortorella is absolutely hands-on. He's going to have a say in personnel. Danny is the GM, and if you bring in an experienced president of hockey ops, and the name that Jason and I started with when we were first kicking names around was Ray Shero, because he's won a Stanley Cup, because he has some handprints on where the Devils have gone since it's obviously he's no longer with them, but I mean in the years since then. But how important is it to actually, okay, we're not just picking a name, but we're picking somebody who kind of shares a vision with the other guys, because otherwise guys start to butt heads and it's hard to move forward, in my opinion.
Well, Bill, one thing you just pointed out that John Tortorella is here. John Tortorella is going to have a voice. And so that becomes another factor in the decision-making in terms of a president of hockey operations, right? John is no shrinking violet. And John's going to speak his mind, and he's going to speak his mind privately. He's going to speak his mind publicly. And that's what and he's passionate. And so, when you mention Ray Shero, and I think that becomes another big factor too. Okay. Somebody that John can look to and say, what, that's a voice that, that I respect. And it's not that John's disrespectful, but like somebody that I'm going to listen to. And, if you have somebody that's a little inexperienced, like Danny, and obviously when you start as a manager for the first time, you're inexperienced, but somebody like Ray, I think there's a couple of things I would say about Ray. And, I've known Ray a long time, and I think we start with names, but I'm going to go to the qualifications, and I think Ray fits every qualification you would want. He think about where he's worked. He's worked in organizations with high standards. Went to Pittsburgh, turned that around. They became Stanley Cup champions with high-end talent, and and then he went to New Jersey. And you're following Lou Lamoriello, and Ray had to forge his own path, much like Danny's going to have to forge his own path. And it's not an easy path to navigate at times. And so Ray went through it, and now he understands that. Having strong coaches, Ray's worked with strong coaches and been around. And, you can even go back to his days in Nashville, working with Barry Trotz and working with David Poile. So Ray, and then to me, the clincher is who understands the Philadelphia market and the demands and the expectations of Philadelphia better than Ray Shero. And with everything else he has. I mean, just the Shero name. But that would be enough. But he understands it and he gets it. So, I think that when you look at all the qualifications that would fit when you're looking for, I totally 100% agree with you. Do I need to build billboards to, raise the guy or, because I think he would be terrific. And I also think Ray knows where he's at now too. Like, I think that he'd be like Jeff Gorton, like really supportive and really helpful to a young GM like Danny Briere. I think it would be a terrific fit.
Yeah, he checks so many of those boxes.
Oh.
And I mean, it's paramount that they make this decision and it's the right decision so we can get off the treadmill of a non-playoff team. Let me ask you about a few players because, a 10th overall pick in Owen Tippett with Florida wasn't able to break through, Craig. Flyers last year make the trade and acquire him in the Claude Giroux deal to the Panthers, along with that first-round pick next year. And Owen Tippett's come in this year with the opportunity in front of him and grabbed it and just has built confidence, every month. And, boy, he's finishing really strong since basically they got back from that West Coast trip. He's been excellent for the team. He scored 2 last night, including the overtime winner, to get his 26th of the season. But I think there's a realization with the player that I'm a good player at this level as well. And you see that in his decision-making on the ice. What have you seen out of the growth of Owen Tippett?
Jason, I think you just nailed it. The realization that you can be a good player at that level. You think he can be. You're a top pick in the draft. You've had success in junior hockey. You're given opportunity. But there's a difference between thinking you can and knowing you can. And right now, Owen is at the point of knowing he can. And he's always been a terrific goal scorer. He's always had this kind of goal scoring ability where he's assertive and he's strong. And I know where I'm going, and you're not going to move me out of here. Like that type of ability to score. And when it's hard, it's hard to score in the National Hockey League. And I think that Owen, always had a terrific shot, but he's really developed his game. I think when I look at the right side of the and I'm talking about young players, and I put Konechny in that group too. You have Konechny, you have Tippett, and I think Tyson Forster is going to be a really good player. And Tyson now, because you have Konechny there and you have Tippett, now Tyson doesn't have to be forced up the lineup into situations, and he can grow and learn in a situation too. So when you have 3 skilled right wingers like that can add offense, we talk about adding skill and adding talent. I think it's really, really like that's a good place to start. I know earlier in the year I was asked in Calgary, they needed a right winger. Could you identify any players that you would go after? And I said those 3 players. I said Konechny, Tippett, and Forster. They're at different levels. Forster more for the future. Tippett, they just traded for him, but maybe there's a deal to be made there. And Konechny, obviously he's had a really strong season. But when there's teams that don't have what the Flyers have on that right side in terms of talent and skill. But I agree with you, Jason. I think that Owen has really found that, and a confident Owen Tippett, a confident goal scorer, is a dangerous goal scorer.
Yeah,
Craig, when we talked to you last year, one of the players we discussed was Morgan Frost, and you said at the time, Frost is too good of a talent not to figure out eventually, but it might have to happen somewhere else. Morgan's been through a process with John Tortorella, and lo and behold, Frost is the Flyers' leading scorer since New Year's. He's really taken that next step. And there have been people involved in this, of course. No player gets the most credit, but it's also a coaching process. There's Mike Yo last year. There's Rocky Thompson this year. And Danny Briere, too. It worked hands-on with Morgan. I'm interested in where he's gone the last year, where he's kind of taken off, and you see him sustaining it.
Yeah, and he has taken off, and what's interesting. Back to John Tortorella too. A lot of times teams with their players, and in all different sports, they take different tacks with respect to development, right? Like, no, we really believe in them, and and you're trying to work. John's straightforward. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And a lot of young players in all sports haven't been told it's not good enough. They've always been good enough. Now they're being told it's not good enough. And I think you have to get into your own mind that, like, he's right. I got to be better. Like, it doesn't matter what I did in the past. And I think that Morgan, call it, we use different words, tough love, whatever we want to use it, right? Like, John's just direct. Like, you're capable. John will work with young players. John will work with players and help them be better. Ask Marty St. Louis about John Tortorella. And Marty St. Louis basically had to go in and tell John Tortorella, well, it was with Steve Ludzik first, but then John Tortorella was, give me a chance, I can do it. Okay. You think you're gonna put it on the line? I'll give you a chance. And so, but if you're not gonna put it on the line and you're not going to dig in and we talk about being hard to play against. Being hard to play against isn't running over everybody. Being hard to play against is saying, I'm not going away. I'm going to be strong on every puck. I might not win every puck, but I'm going to be in every puck fight. I'm going to be in every puck battle. I'm going to be on the right side of the play as much as I can. That's being hard to play against. That's being tenacious and detailed and disciplined. And that's what a lot of young players have to learn. And I think that Morgan, who's always been a gifted player, he needed to physically mature, right? To me, that was the biggest thing that needed to happen with Morgan. But he's got a massive hockey brain. He's smart. He's intelligent. He makes plays. He can make people around him better. And I just talked about the wingers. You get skill around a playmaking guy like Morgan Frost. Now you have those complementary players. So do I think he can sustain it? Yeah. Does he need some complementary players around him? Yes. And I think that, again, much like Owen, it's one thing to think he can, but now he's seeing, okay, it's been hard. John's been demanding of me, but like now I've got to this side here, and players like when they get to the right side and the good side. They like it, and I think that Morgan, will I think he can sustain it, Bill. I think that he's emerged, and I think that he can sustain it.
I think the biggest way you can tell if a player knows that he belongs and is the decisions they make on the ice. And like I talked about with Tippett, you see the decision making of Morgan Frost, plays that he would have made because of the risk that comes with them. Now he makes them with confidence because he knows he can make them. And sometimes you're going to make a mistake. That happens. Hockey's a game of mistakes. Craig, last thing for you, Torts has talked about subtraction is the first piece here. Now, subtraction is nice, but you have to have addition after subtraction because you got to field the team. But, there's a timeline now with a team in a rebuild, who fits it, who doesn't fit it, who are guys that are part of the solution here from, an on-ice, off-ice professionalism, all those things. There's going to be some guys that are going to depart, whether that's Kevin Hayes, Ivan Provorov, Tony DeAngelo, or others. How's the market for these type of players? Like a Kevin Hayes, who's 30, has played some wing this year because Torts has moved him there, but likes to play center. I look at Winnipeg, Dallas. I see some teams, maybe if Bergeron retires, if they win the Cup, Boston would be looking for a center. How's the market and for players like Hayes, Provorov, DeAngelo?
What I would say is Kevin is shown to be a really good player, and I think that there would absolutely be a market for a 30-year-old Kevin Hayes, and his contract isn't prohibitive. In today's NHL, when you look at the dollars, I don't think it's prohibitive. So I would definitely see a market for certainly for Kevin. Ivan is a young player. He's 26 years old. He's going to be 26 years old. There's no question that teams are going to be interested in Ivan Provorov. There's simply no question. And, off season becomes a time when teams can make those decisions and make those maneuvers with their group. But there's just no way that a player of Ivan's talents are not going to be welcomed in NHL on NHL rosters. They're just will it be everyone? No, because not everyone needs that type of player. And putting everything else aside, I just think that Ivan has a talent that is pretty strong. So I think the market for both those players would be strong. Tony is a fascinating person and player. He's such a good player. He really is a good player, and he plays the game in a manner that very few can play it in. And I think we know what happened in New York, but then he goes to Carolina and he's really good. And then he leaves Carolina, he comes to Philadelphia, and he's had his good and some different. I mean, I still don't think he deserved a 2-game suspension for that play, but that's just me. But I think you have to be ready to work with Tony and accept Tony for what he does on the ice. If you're going to try to take him and reshape him and mold him into something, you're never going to be happy with Tony, and Tony's never going to be happy. And I think there has to be an acceptance there. But you're looking at somebody who can run a power play and run offensive plays from the blue line that isn't common. I think it's going to have to be the right fit for him, both team-wise and coach-wise. So the market might not be as big for Tony, but I don't see any reason why teams wouldn't be interested in Kevin Hayes or Ivan Provorov. Now, you can manufacture reasons, but from a playing point of view, those two players are real solid with, in my view, age and contracts that are good.
Craig, I lied. I have one more for you. Because one of the things.
Okay, sure. No problem. I'm not. You can have 2 more if you want, or 3 more. I'm all good. Don't worry.
But I want to ask you about Carter Hart, because some people say trade him because you can get a haul for him right now. You have Sam Ersson. Ersson doesn't play enough for me to go down that path to know that he's going to be an NHL top goaltender. But it's hard to judge a rebuild when you don't get goaltending, because it's hard to judge your team, because if you don't get goaltending, it's hard for the players in front of him to play the game the right way. Because if you fear you're going to make a mistake and you're pulling the puck out of your net, that's no way to play this game. And, he's back there. He can erase a lot of those mistakes. He's been really good this year. But people say, he's the piece that can get you the most. And if you're in a rebuild, why don't you trade Carter Hart? Now, he's still young. He's 24 years old, or be 24 in August. And he's got a lot of prime years in front of him. How do you look at the goaltending situation in a rebuild? Because we've seen teams like Buffalo without any goaltending, so it's been difficult to judge where they are. We see, this year, although Arizona got goaltending with Vemelka, but teams all over the league trying to do a rebuild without goaltending is very difficult. So where do you fall in the possibility of moving a goaltender like Carter Hart?
Well, okay, so what is a haul? What do we define as a haul? Right, I don't think you get a haul
for goalies.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jason. So people go, you can get a haul for. Well, how about if we rewind this just in a way, and I'll ask you guys this question: how would the Buffalo Sabres look with Linus Ullmark in their net this year?
Oof. Yeah.
They'd be a playoff club, that's for sure.
Yep.
Bill, I'm with you. I'm right there with you. So, Linus doesn't have the same resume at the stage of the career they traded him that Carter Hart does, right? So all I would say is, Carter is at an age now where goaltenders start to dominate and start to move forward, right? So it's great to say you can get a haul, right? But that haul, is it going to help you now? Is it going to help you? And if you're going to get a haul, when is it going to help you? Because you got a lot of other players that are there now, and you have a team that you need to play and to perform, and you don't want your team to get beat up by losing games that you could have won or you could have been in. Like that affects players' confidences too. Bingo. I look at the LA Kings; they were a rebuilding team, and last year, and they made the playoffs, and now they're a team trying to take another step. And Rob Blake loves Jonathan Quick. He said, my goaltending isn't good enough. He had to move along, right? So my point is, when you have a team like LA that's going like, we know there's a statue going up for Jonathan Quick in LA. We know that he's got Hall of Fame credentials, and he very well may find himself there. But when your team is in that spot, you can't start saying, "Oh well, Jonathan Quick, his goaltending wasn't good enough anymore," and that was hurting the team. So if you're going to trade Carter Hart, you better be sure of two things. Number one, that you have a goaltender that's capable, and I'm not talking about thinking. You better be sure. Okay, that's number one. And number two is, what is that haul, and when is that haul going to help your team? Because like first round pick next year and a young prospect, and you get a player. That's not a haul when you have a clear-cut number one goaltender. There's 32 teams in the league, and there's not 32 clear-cut number ones. Carter's one of them, and he's at
There's
an
about
age.
seven, Craig, in today's NHL.
Yeah,
About
there you
7
go.
number
Yeah.
ones.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So, to me, he's clear-cut, and you better be really careful. And this idea, oh, yeah, we can trade him, and then we can get this. Okay. Show me what you can get. I remember being in Calgary, and we had the discussion, and coincidentally, I was talking to Bob Clark, and they said, well, let's find out what we can get for Jerome McGinley, right? Let's find out what we can get for Jerome McGinley. So I'm talking to Bob, and he goes, it's, because my feeling was you don't want to put a name out there and have Jerome, because I didn't want to trade him, and I wasn't looking to trade him, but the idea was, let's find out. And I said, well, how do you find out, right? Well, anyway, long story short, you start to hear what other managers. Now, this is Jerome McGinley, and this is Jerome McGinley, that was already established as a star, like an elite star. Well, you started to realize that what people thought a haul was, other teams were, as they're wanted to do, they're not going to give you everything you want and everything, right? And we'll give you this. How about 2 first-round draft picks? Well, we got 2 really good prospects, and how about this player off our team? Obviously, a player they don't want, right? And you start to sit back and you go, yeah, right, yeah. Like you're going to trade a star player like Jerome because you think you get a haul. There's not very many times you get a haul. The Flyers ended up trading a haul to get Eric Lindros. The Quebec Nordiques got a haul. That's a haul.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen very many trades that have had that type of return. And the Flyers did very well by getting Eric Lindros, and we know what the Nordiques Avalanche did. But you're talking about to me a number one goaltender. You better be careful. It goes without saying that's a key position.
Yeah, it's the known commodity for the unknown commodity. And for a general manager, that's a scary element of it too. No doubt.
Well, it is. And you talk about Ersson and you talk about Sandstrom and whatnot, but Carter's not 31. He's not 31, and you're thinking, okay, who's going to be our guy, and who would and again, the market. You asked me earlier, what would the market be for Hayes and D'Angelo and Provorov, right? Like the other thing with the goaltending market is the market's a lot narrower and it's a lot smaller.
Yeah.
And then it even gets smaller and narrower. If you think you're getting a haul, well, who are you getting that haul from?
You're not going to get Draisaitl out of Edmonton for Carter Hart. That's the deal.
Well, yeah. Well, not, but even a team that might say, I need a goaltender, the Flyers might go, well, you don't have anybody that we can get the haul with.
Yeah, good point. Craig, this was awesome as always, man. We really appreciate it. Your yearly visits always, they never disappoint. We know that. Enjoy these playoffs and don't work too hard. I mean, it's 2 months. It's a grind. And I know you guys work your rear ends off throughout these playoffs. It's going to be fascinating. So as always, make sure everybody follow Craig on Twitter at Craig J. Button. Craig, thanks for doing this. And we'll talk again next season, man. Really, really appreciate the time as always.
Always my pleasure, Jason and Bill. You guys do a fantastic job. It's always a real honor to join you. So thanks for having me.
There he is, Craig Button from TSN. And a man that I'm nominating for the president of Hockey Ops.
Hey, he checks a lot of boxes too, right?
Yeah, he does. Well, he couldn't have been more resolute on the qualifications and fit of Ray Shero, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I could have asked Craig questions for hours. We hardly even got to the draft.
Yeah.
So,
that's bonkers, right?
Yeah.
The thing I was really surprised about, Craig, was the notion of positioning your team, tanking, whatever you want to call it, and he was kind of all for it. I'm surprised by
Yeah,
that.
well, yeah. To me, and you and I have discussed this any number of times too. You know, there's two ways of going about it, right? They should obviously coalesce at some point. Collecting talent and building a team, right? And obviously, if you're doing it right, the two things come together.
Yeah.
You know, but to me, Buffalo was a team that until very recently collected a lot of talent, but they've never built a team.
Yeah.
You know, Edmonton did that for a long time too. Look at all the time the Edmonton picked for. I'm talking about ahead of McDavid. So they picked early, but yet they never seem to get anywhere. You know,
Yeah.
and you just you know, and he said even a guy like Bedard, right? Well, Bedard has what 140 points or so, right? And clearly an incredible talent. And Regina's just kind of an average team.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to, you know, you want to ultimately be an average or below average team with a superstar. You want to have a superstar leading a very good team to being a contender and hopefully eventually a champion. And I think you have to keep the team building in mind too.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. You know, you look at teams like Tampa, and you know, Stamkos is the #1 overall pick. To build a team, you have to check certain boxes with a superstar. You know, Stamkos, great player, great leader, runs that room. Stud #1 D-man in Victor Hedman, goaltending in Andrei Vasilevsky, and tremendous offensive depth. That's you look at the Boston Bruins. This is not a top of the draft built team. Taylor Hall's a #1 overall pick, but wasn't drafted by Boston. But you look at where they got Marchand, where they got Bergeron, where they got Pasternak. You know how they've built their blue line. Yeah, they drafted McAvoy, but they've really built this blue line. But with the addition of Hampus Lindholm, the way they've built themselves into being this now historic team, Bill, is not through tanking.
No, or Dallas. I mean, for a long time, Jamie Benn was the face of that organization.
Yeah.
And had a big resurgent year this year. Hey, Jamie Benn was a 5th-round pick in 2007.
Yeah.
If you're redrafted, obviously, Chicago's still taking Patrick Kane 1st overall. Flyers may not take JVR 2nd. They might have taken Jamie Benn. It was, a 5th-round guy. Look at Jason Robertson. He was a 2nd-round guy.
Yeah.
You have to get lucky at different points in the draft sometimes too. Guys who just far exceed expectations. It's a very inexact science. So obviously those top picks are important. They do increase your chances of, but there's more than one way of getting there to the point.
Yeah, look at Joe Pavelski was taken in the 7th round in 2003, and he's still getting it done. Like that guy's amazing, man.
Yeah, that's such a crazy story too, Jason, because Pavelski was taken with a pick that originally belonged to the Flyers.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those things. Obviously, even the biggest retro drafting people, how do you miss Pavelski? How the whole NHL miss Pavelski, right? But the whole point was that the Flyers. It's one of those things where they're offered a 6th-round pick for a 7th, a 6th next year for a 7th this year, and nobody even thinks those are footnote trades, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, Pavelski's the guy that was taken with that pick. The guy that the Flyers picked was a Slovak, Ladislav Skurko, and he's only notable for one thing: he murdered a referee and buried the body in the forest.
Wow.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
crazy.
Pavelski's still tipping pucks home.
Right, exactly.
That's amazing.
Crazy.
Well, great visit with Craig, as always. I love having him on. He's such a great guy, and he's got strong opinions, which we love, and provides us some great content every year. So, Bill, we'll put a wrap on it there. Great stuff, as always. Flyers will wrap up the season tomorrow night, and then the real work begins, I suppose.
It's going to be a very busy, very interesting offseason. Front office, roster, so on down the line. Scouts, probably. You see some turnover there. It's going to be a very different organization. 10 September, for sure.
Let me ask you the timeline on the president real quick, because, Fried said that the team wanted to name a president of hockey operations, and he used the word expeditiously.
Right.
But there may be guys that you can't talk to for a while because they're with other teams. Do you expect this to happen rather quickly?
I mean, I would say ideally no. To me, this is a decision you should rush. You should really talk to all the candidates you've identified as guys who you have interested, and then see where the right fit is. This is a critical decision as to where the direction is going to go. And as you know, I said during it too, you're going to have a group working together. So it has to be somebody who's going to have to be able to work well with Torts. Somebody's got to be able to work well with Danny. Someone's going to have to be able to work well with the corporate side because they're a liaison also in the president's role. You know, like years ago when Paul Holmgren became team president, you know, Ed Snyder said to him, you know, Homer, I'm not always going to be here. So what I want you to do is I want you to make sure the Flyers are always the Flyers. Like about putting responsibility on somebody's shoulders, right?
Yeah.
Well, this next club president, it's going to be your responsibility is to remake the Flyers into basically rebuild the brand.
Yeah.
So you better consider the candidates carefully and not rush.
Yeah. Don't limit your field too because of a fault. You know, it's almost a false timeline that you have to do it quickly. So we'll see where it goes, and we'll be following it as close as anybody. So read Bill's stuff on PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. And that'll put a wrap on episode 61, our special edition, along with Craig Button of Stick to Hockey Live. So everybody, enjoy the final game tomorrow night. We'll talk to you soon on another edition of Stick to Hockey.